Some passages, stories, rules, and regulations from the Torah may seem unfair, parochial, or downright offensive to our modern sensibilities. When we come across such teachings, as we do in a few ways in this week's Torah portions, it is crucial to view these verses through the lenses of Talmudic and later rabbinic interpretation. This week, we conclude the book of Numbers, Bamidbar, with the double portion of Matot Maaseh. These portions are almost always combined, except in some leap years. The subject matter moves from the merely problematic to the downright reprehensible. We read how either a husband or a father can annul the vows of his wife or daughter. We read of the total decimation of the Midianites by the command of God and Moses. We read of the choice of the tribes of Reuben and Gad to dwell in Transjordan, which is less of a moral issue, but nonetheless potentially undermines the willingness of the other tribes to possess the promised land. After the explicit borders of the land of Israel are described, which includes almost all of the modern-day West Bank, one source for the advocates of annexation, we are taught repeatedly that if someone murders, the close relative of the victim, the blood avenger, is mandated to kill the murderer, unless it was an accidental killing, for which case cities of refuge will be established for the accidental killers to avoid punishment, but in which they must dwell until the death of the high priest. Finally, the text concludes with the additional clause to the case of the daughters of Slavchad. They may inherit their father's land portion, but they are compelled to marry their distant or not so distant cousins within their tribe, so that the land will not leave the realm of the tribe. The rabbinic treatment of one particular verse provides a possible avenue of an antidote to many of these problematic passages. In Numbers chapter 35, verse 30, we read, "Anyone who kills a person, by witnesses shall the murderer be murdered, but one witness shall not answer for a person for death." The verse is not teaching, according to the rabbis in Tractate Sanhedrin, that the witnesses actually execute the murderer. Rather, the verse is emphasizing the plural. One witness shall never suffice to put someone to death. Instead, at least two witnesses are required. In the Talmud, this leads into a discussion of the procedures for the death penalty, including the requirement of edim v'hatra'ah, witnesses and warning. The rabbis infer from the requirement of two witnesses that many details are implied. The witnesses cannot be related in any way, either to each other or to the perpetrator. The witnesses must demand of the perpetrator out loud, "Do you know that what you are about to do is a violation of the Torah and carries the death penalty?" The perpetrator has to respond out loud, "I know, and I'm going to do it anyway." And then the act must be carried out within 7 seconds. Otherwise, the perpetrator could have forgotten the warning. This is why Rabbi Akiva is to have said that any court that puts someone to death once every 70 years is a murderer's court. In other words, while leaving the text of the Torah theoretically possible, the rabbis render it practically impossible. Why is the death penalty even there, you might ask? To testify to the ultimate value of life. So now, with this principle of limiting the practical implications of problematic teachings, let us review the problem passages in our parsha. There seems to be a sexist imbalance in who can annul whose vows. But good husbands and fathers who trust their wives and daughters can empower them to speak for themselves. The genocide of the Midianites seems cruel and unusual, but it is explicitly limited to this incident of revenge for their attempted genocide of the Israelites. And the Torah has favorable things to say about Midianites elsewhere, from being one version of the caravan that saved Joseph to being the identity of Moses' wife and father-in-law. Moses is initially incensed that the 2.5 tribes don't want to enter the land, but they make it clear that they will join the rest of the Israelites in the conquest until it is complete. The description of the borders of the land could be used to support modern Israeli policy, but there are at least 2 other border accounts in the Torah, one much larger and one much smaller. The only clause that proves elusive for a redemptive interpretation is the daughters of Slavchad's limited marriage options. That can be understood as limited to when tribes reverted to their original inheritance every 50 years, a practice that has been rendered obsolete by 2 exiles. Not every verse or teaching in the Torah can be redeemed. Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan once said that the Torah is like the childhood diary of the Jewish people, sacred and special because it contains our innocent stories and ideas, but a text which, in many ways, we have matured to understand in new and different ways. As you read the Parshiot and conclude the book of Bamidbar this week, bring to mind what we would have said in shul after the last verse was read. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. Be strong, and let us strengthen one another. Or have insight, and let us share our insights with each other. Shabbat shalom.